American, Choctaw, and maybe some French. And they're from Louisiana. And my father's family is Geechee, and they're from South Carolina. So I grew up with a very diverse family. We have all kinds of different races in my family, so it wasn't a big deal to me. I also grew up in Flint, Michigan. So Flint, Michigan is basically um, an an industrial. I'm sorry, an industrial city. It was an industrial city, and it had been devastated by General Motors closing a lot of plants, automobile plants down. Most of my friends or family worked for the automobile industry, and they made a good living, a middle class living. So when we started having issues in the city of Flint, we lived there, and there was a drive-by shooting and other things. There was like they were starting up gangs and this and that. My family moved to Burton, and I went to Kearsley District School. It was a suburb, and at that school, it was predominantly Caucasian. There were a couple of Asian kids, and those Asian kids I believe, were almost all of them were adopted, except for one that I know of that wasn't adopted, but almost all of them were adopted by white families. And then there was a handful of Mexican kids and me, who I do consider myself to be African American. I mean, when people look at me, that's what they see, and that's what I believe I am, the majority of what I am. But I also do feel a close connection and affinity to the fact that I'm also Choctaw Indian from my mom's side, and I'm also part Irish on my mom's side as well. But I relate closely with how people have looked at me and the black struggle. I relate with that, and I'm a black woman. So we moved there, and I was one of the only black kids. There was one mixed boy in my middle school. No, I'm sorry, two mixed boys and one black girl that went to school with me. So at when I first started middle school. So, it just wasn't very diverse, but I I was okay. I was okay with the skin I was in, and I had always been raised in a Baptist church, and they were really big on celebrating culture and Black culture and teaching about Black History Month and that sort of thing. And every Sunday, I always saw Black people. Well, the first day of school, a boy hit me in the head with a basketball. He threw it at my head, and I had my head turned to the side so I didn't see it. And he did it because I had balls and barrettes in my hair. And the kids teased me for the rest of the first day about my hair. Then, as the years progressed, there was more teasing and things like that. But my parents always said that sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. It did hurt a little. I went at my high school. It was more like, if you've ever seen Pie, the American Pie movie, you have like your different cliques or groups of kids. You have the jocks, you have this and that. And I mostly hung out with the band kids, and the band kids they were fine. They were cool with me, and um, you know, there were people who had not ever been around Black people, and one of my friends actually said, I'd like to invite you to my birthday party, but my dad doesn't like Black people, so I can't invite you. And I was really hurt, and I was kind of upset with her because I had developed a thick shell around myself where I had no patience for racism, and I was not. did not give grace or mercy to anyone that was being disrespectful. I always stood up for the underdog. So I would not only be just friends with like the band people, but I would be friends with the most. There were some kids that were severely obese that I went to school with, and I was friends with. I was always nice to everyone if they were nice to me. But if they were mean to me, I gave it to them. I'm sorry. I let them know what was on my mind. I said how I felt, and I would cuss them out. Wow. Somewhere around the ninth grade, I was sitting in class, in Mr. Chill's class, and someone said that they didn't like Black people. We were talking about affirmative action. And at the Kersey School District, the only thing they taught about Black history was Martin Luther King, affirmative action, and that was about it. So the consensus in my class was basically that affirmative action was wrong. So I just I just sat there, listened to people talk or whatever. Then people started to elaborate on the conversation and bring up Black people. One gentleman said that he felt like Black people should still be slaves, and that, another girl said that she thought that Black people were dirty and nasty and she hated playing basketball with them. And, it just really hurt my feelings when I heard that, because these are the people I ride the bus with, I go to school with, people who always ask me, can I see your notes? Because I was a good note taker. And this is the way they felt about Black people. So I was like, what about me? And the girl said, you're not like other Black people, Brandy. You shave your armpits. You don't smell this, that, and the other. But I am a Black person. My dad was blacker than Black. So how can you say that? It hurt me so bad I started crying because other people were agreeing, and I felt like you see me every day, and even if we're not cool or friends or whatever, we still talk, and this is how you feel about Black people. It made me sad. And I previously had always had a cuss people out in 2 seconds rule, but I began to see myself as an example. Now, I pondered it. I cried. I started crying. I went to the next class and I cried. And they're like, oh, you should go see the counselor, this or that. What is the counselor going to do for me? Now, the teacher in the class did say, that he was sorry that they felt that way. But I'm living this life. Like, yeah, he's sorry, but he's white. I'm living this life where people do not approve of the color of my skin or other people who look like me or darker or lighter. So I I started making changes in myself. Now, I don't blame myself for how they looked at me or how they looked at other Black people, but I know that I was an example of a Black person to them. So I began to not be so offended or offensive, when someone, I wanted to show in my personality an example of what Black people are. Not the ghetto, upset, angry Black woman. I wanted for myself to show them, a different side. And people did years later come up to me and tell me that they learned a lot about Black people from watching me or seeing me interact or just on a daily basis, because most of the kids that I went to school with had never been around black people. The only time they ever saw black people on a regular basis was on television, and they weren't the people who watched Cosby Show or Family Matters. They were the people who watched Minister Society, Friday, and all those funny and those kind of Big Mama's House, those kind of parody things, and violence, Boys in the Hood. They did not see everyday normal life for African Americans. They saw gangs and violence and things like that. So I tried my best. I tried my best to show them something that was different. And, as an educator, I feel that the teacher should have been more more vocal. He didn't really, he was older. He was one of the oldest teachers at my school, but he didn't really address the situation I felt was in a proper way. I think that many times we focus on the similarities, the differences between people, when we really should focus on the similarities between our cultures. We all eat, sleep, brush our teeth, take a shower. We all do these things. We're all human. So he didn't do that. And another thing that I noticed was a lot of self-hate and people who were mixed at the school with me. And they saw themselves, when they were raised by another race, they didn't see themselves as black or Asian or Mexican. They saw themselves as a white person. Now, as an educator, I feel that if you are going to adopt a child of a different race, you need to research the culture or the race that you are adopting. So, if I was to adopt a child from, a white child or of Irish descent or wherever, Germany or wherever, I would research that, and I would take them to events where they can learn about their culture, and also events where they can see other races, church, museums, things of that nature. I think it's important that your child see themselves, magazines, books. And I would try not to have negative people or comments around my child about that race. So I have seen it many times, even in my own students. I have seen children who were adopted that do not like being black or do not like being mixed or whatever race. That's not good. Assimilation is important. When we came to the United States, it was like so many different races and cultures coming in, and it just built a melting pot. However, we're not erasing who we are. Our food, that's another way. If you have a mixed race child, or you should have both sets of food in your child's life. They should not just be eating bologna sandwiches or hot dogs. You need to provide that for them. That way they get a sense of where they come from, their roots. Also, as an African American, or if you're Hispanic or Asian, the backlash and the things that of racism, you need to be sensitive to that if you are a parent of a different race. As a child who grew up surrounded by nothing but Caucasians, I have seen time and time again where people constantly say it was someone's fault when they were beaten or, hurt by the police or killed. They shouldn't have put themselves in that. They shouldn't have been there anyways. Victim blaming, basically. I don't think that you should adopt a child from another race if you are a victim blamer. Because slavery was only 200 years ago. That is 4 generations. There are still people today that believe, depending on where you live and who you live next to, believe that other races are inferior to them. And these people, some of these people who are racist, are in positions of power where they can push their racism on people of color. And that is not fair. And it is not fair to raise children who are a different race from you without a sense of who they are, so that when they go out in the world and they say, a police picks them up or something for smoking weed or whatever the situation, they're not going to just get community service. They're going to serve jail time. They're going to have a record. Or they're not going to be like, oh, that's just such and such a son. Don't let me catch you doing this again. As a person that is a minority in America, this is what is happening. And you need to make yourself very aware of the cultures when you choose to adopt children or bring them up. And also, I feel like in our culture, in our new century, there have been a lot of mixed race children. And if you are mixed race, you deserve to know, you should know all about all your cultures, about the different things that historically have happened. You should know all of that, and that should not be kept from you. And that is such a disservice to children. Now, just from my own personal experience, my son is half Mexican, and I always say that not only just when I married his dad, but when I had him, he was inside of me. So I feel, this is just my opinion, but I feel like the Mexican culture has been inside of me. It is inside of me. It's a part of me, because my son and many of my family members are Mexican. So when someone says or does something that is derogatory towards a Mexican person or about a Mexican or Hispanic community, I take offense. I take offense to ignorance, and I like to educate. So I was at work. Those of you that don't know, I live in Arizona now. I was at work, and I worked at, when I first moved here, we did built collection agency. So I was there, and there was one other Mexican lady there, and there was the rest were white people on that shift. and our office was like in a square. So all the cubes were in a square around around basically around the interior of the building in a square. So we were sitting there, and the president election, was going on, and people were talking about the wall, building a wall, well, making the wall longer, and basically, one of the ladies there said that, she hopes that, they go back to Mexico, uh, and those types of comments. Well, I was waiting for the other Mexican lady to say something, but she didn't say anything. Comments were made that Mexicans were nasty and dirty. Yeah. So I spoke up. I said that is clearly unacceptable. Uh, a lot of Mexicans do work in the service industry. They cut grass. They have companies where they, cut grass and do your lawn, and they also clean people's houses, work in restaurants. Basically a lot of different manual jobs, and but we also have people that are into politics, and lawyers and teachers, and that are Mexican as well. So I had to educate the lady that at least they are working for their money, and they're not lower status than you, or lower class citizens. Also, it amazes me that we look at other cultures, that people look at other cultures as dirty. If I'm cutting grass all day, I'm going to be dirty. If I'm cleaning your house, I'm going to be sweaty. That's just a fact of the matter, And um, I think that more people need to speak out, even if you just say, I don't agree with that, or, you know, that is not appropriate, or something. Say something, open your mouth and say something, because we there's a lot of good people out there, white, black, whatever color. There's a lot of good people out there, but when we decide not to open our mouths and speak when someone is spitting hateful rhetoric, then it allows it to overtake, just as simply as the Holocaust. If we don't speak our mind and we don't say it, it'll overtake us. So I just wanted to give, I hope,